Good evening, and welcome to the Norwich City Council meeting, January 17th, 2017. If you all would please stand, and Alderman Martin will lead us in prayer.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that peace and harmony will mark all of our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen.
Alderman Gould, please the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Citizen comment general.
This is the time when we would welcome your remarks about anything concerning the city. Does not have to be on the agenda. I would ask you to please state your name clearly, your address, and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We have a few people who have signed up. First would be Herbert Nyberg.
Honorable Mayor Hinchey and council members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the Norwich City Council. My name is Herbert Nyberg.
Thank you.
From Old Lyme, Connecticut, 6 Hawthorne Road. I am from Colonial Car Wash on West Main Street in Norwich. I would like to thank the mayor for making the effort to visit my business to discuss proposed improvements to West Main Street. As I said when you visited, the business health of West Main Street needs to be an important consideration. Any modification having potential negative impact on the important business corridor will have serious consequences for the city of Norwich's already stressed tax base. I said that I would be supportive of any plan where you can document its implementation improves the business environment. Mr. Thompson, Director of Public Works, said he had such proof that roundabouts improve business climate. He promptly followed up with an email of 2 examples of economic impact reports, Golden, Colorado, and Billings, Montana. The Golden, Colorado study, which is referenced in almost all subsequent studies I have found, has been touted as an excellent example. It was published in 2004 concluding sales tax revenues have increased 60% since installation of the roundabouts. When looked at more closely, these results are misleading. The study period actually began 2 years prior to completion of construction in 1998 and concluded in 2003. Simultaneous with the roundabout construction, a 17,000 square foot shopping center was completed. This alone counted for the increase. When looking only in the period after 2000 to 2003, the increase in tax revenue actually lagged population increase by 2%. I think it is important to note that tax revenue is not a reliable indicator alone of economic vitality. While traffic counts are one of the most important economic dimensions affecting retail business. From 2008 to 2016, the population of Golden, Colorado increased 18%. The average daily traffic count throughout Golden, Colorado increased 12%, while over that same period, the traffic flow on South Golden Road decreased 21.55%, representing a net 32% loss in business potential. Similar negative impacts can be seen in Billings, Montana, where from 2000 to 2010, population increased 14.5%, while the study streets remained static at less than 13,000 cars per day. Both prove the proposed traffic circles will have a major negative impact on the businesses of West Main Street. It's interesting to note that in Billings, Montana, their circles are half-mile apart in a flat rural area. They overran their $40 million 2002 budget estimate. Norwich, now 15 years later, with significantly more complicated and aging utilities, will be much more costly. There is no way the Norwich project can be done for $50 million. The data clearly shows the real-world negative impacts roundabouts have on high-traffic business districts. I urge the City Council to vote as soon as possible to reject further considerations of traffic circles as a remedy to West Main Street.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Marvin Cerruto.
My name is Marvin Cerruto, 100 Star Street, Norwich, Connecticut, United States of America. First off, I have a photo I took of City Hall during the holiday season. It's quite nice. I'd like to give this to Beryl for her collection that she started last meeting. I also have a small donation here for the fireworks fund. Hopefully I can help kick that off, and there'll be more forthcoming. The last couple of years, we've had a lot of surprises. The last thing the city of Norwich needs is more blindsiding. I'm not going to go into any details. I'm encouraging the council to go forward with vigilance and diligence. If you see something, say something, especially when large dollars are involved. It looks like we're getting Washington, D.C. squared away. It looks like Hartford may have a fighting chance this year. Let's follow through here with the city of Norwich. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Beryl Fishbone?
Beryl Fishbone, 19 Bliss Place. I talked about the importance of marketing to the city of Norwich, Connecticut, and I identified it as the management process of moving goods and services from concept to customer. Advertising is calling public attention to a product through paid announcements in the media. Branding is the marketing practice of creating a name, a symbol that identifies and differentiates a product from similar products already on the market. Promotion is the activity that supports or provides encouragement to further a goal. And I'm going to talk about sponsorship because that's supporting financially with goods and services or money. But it's the empowerment that is giving individuals or groups the authority or power to do something. Empowerment is a process that encourages others to become stronger and more confident. In business and government, empowerment is encouraging others to make decisions that will benefit others. It is not necessary for a single individual, group, or government to do all of these things. But for a successful community to grow, there must be all of these things, as well as collaboration, cooperation, and most of all, communication. Communication is the exchanging of information between parties. It is communicating, is making and maintaining those connections between the parties. I understand there are some issues happening throughout the city, so it's the perfect time to work on the communication skills that will empower our residents, businesses, and leaders to collaborate, sponsor, and promote for the good of the city so that we can move on as a whole towards a future that we can be proud of and where we can together make a difference. Just a few reminders now. I have to get a little ad in here. The February 3rd will be First Friday. The Great Backyard Bird Count is February 17th through the 20th. Please look for, when we have snow, and it's inevitable, we'll have snow, if you see 24-inch tall snow sculptures around town. And there will also be sneaker collections at the various fun runs. And we're going to be doing that through Souls for Souls. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Massey?
Susan Massey, 1 Sachem Terrace. I really hate speaking in front of an audience, and most nights I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than speak to an audience. Yet here I am, nattering at you again about the Reed and Hughes. And it's not just the historic Reed and Hughes that gets me up here. I am passionate about Norwich, but I am also very practical. I'm afraid I'll never be able to sell my house unless things in town start to shape up. Historical buildings are what we have. You think Norwich, you think historical buildings. So I don't get it. I just don't understand why the council is proceeding with the demolition of the Reed and Hughes when there is a reasonable and viable alternative. Your constituency has been reaching out to you to save the building. here at this podium, via letters to the local newspapers, petitions, and otherwise. And sure, Norwich Heritage Trust asked them to do it, but people don't make that kind of an effort unless they feel strongly about it. We don't need an art park downtown. We need people living downtown. Not just events, not just First Fridays, they're great, but when there are sufficient people every day, small shops will pop up to serve them. It's not like the chicken or the egg. It's more a gradual thing like the chicken and the egg. For example, there are more restaurants downtown now than before the Warregan was rehabbed. Let's keep it going. Let's not give up. It's not going to be fancy little gift shops. It'll be convenience stores. And by all means, don't spend $800,000 of your taxpayers' money to tear down a building that your constituency wants to keep. People are going to start screaming if that happens. But you can be the council that made good progress downtown. Take advantage of the Women's Institute's unflagging interest in this building. Let's do it, and let's do it right. Thanks.
Thank you. Leanne Gomes.
Hi, good evening. We just wanted to take a couple of minutes to introduce to you our newest employee, Angela Ray Duhame, who will be working on our Partnership for Success grant. The Partnership for Success grant was a grant that we applied for about 8 months ago, and we won. Yay. We're going to get $138,000 for the next 4 years to combat underage drinking and prescription drug abuse between the ages of 25 and 12. Thank you. So Angela is the person that we hired to do that for us. We're really thrilled to have her on board. We want to give a shout out to Kay Ibers, who was the instigator for having us apply for this grant, and she did a lot of work on that before she retired. The money comes from SAMHSA to the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We're able to hire Angela and then a peer advocate, who is a person under the age of 25 who will be helping us to embed ourselves in the young adult community. A couple months ago, I sent you a report on the heroin task force, and I sent you a map that highlights how prevalent heroin overdose is in Norwich and heroin use is in Norwich. We're actually a hot spot in New London County, and that's one of the things that we're looking to Angela to help us address. For the first time ever, a youth survey showed that kids are using prescription drugs more than they are using alcohol or marijuana, and we find that frightening, and we just don't want them to roll into prescription drug abuse is bad enough. We don't want them to start using heroin. So again, we're just really happy to have Angela. I'm going to save a little time for her to say a couple words.
Yes, I just would like to say I'll be looking to reach out to each one of you to get information and feedback. The first 3 months of the grant will be involved in a community needs assessment, and then there'll be a strategic planning process that will undergo through the months of April, March, and June. So I'll be looking forward to connecting with you all to get your feedback, your information, and your input on that plan. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. And congratulations. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Wilfred Savage. I'm not a resident of Norwich.
Please sit down, sir. This gentleman is coming up to the podium.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this, but shame on you for none of you putting in a...
Please state your name and address.
Oh, my name is John Oldfield. I live on Lawler Lane in Norwich, 185. The farm that my grandfather bought after World War I, who grew up in Greenville. And I spent my entire life there. But I just want to say shame on all of you city councilors for not putting in an ethics complaint where 2 civilians had to do it. I'm one of them. Because no one on the city council had the nerve to do that. So just want to say thank you. Good job. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
Good evening, David Crabb, 47 Prospect Street. After the NPU resolution that corrected for hanging chads to permit NPU to borrow enough to replace all dated meters, I was reminded of a Ronald Reagan quote about doubters of eternal life. He said, "Look no further than any government program." Then yesterday, news included the Clintons' decision to shut down their foundation. And a critic wondered how long it would be until Bill and Hill began to reminisce about the good old days, and voila, another foundation crops up. I didn't hear many details on the need category unless shuffling manpower is critical to NPU. So I made an 8-year comparison of utility rates from the election of Obama to the Trump election, primarily because the 2009 ARRA that added $800 billion to national debt allotted 10% to renewable energy subsidies. For starters, there isn't much renewable about water and sewers, but the customer charges for these two doubled. That's more than 9% over 8 years. And sewer upgrades are all borrowed money. Customer charges for gas increased more than 45%, while electricity was more than 60% over 8 years. The expansion of gas customers is an eye-opener because 8 years ago, the purchase price adjustment was more than $1. In November, there was 4 cents coming back. However, remember, Russia and OPEC just agreed to raise fossil fuel prices, so the bloom is coming off the rose for gas. Heating with gas could get expensive with a capital tracker increasing the cost by 12.5%. NPU defines customer charges this way: to cover services, billing, meter readings, meter services, and maintaining services to be ready to provide emergency services. I remember when a transformer blew, the whole neighborhood was dark. The capital tracker seems to be double billing. My meters were in the house when I bought in 1970. They still work fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items?
Dale Plummer, 25 Broadway, Norwich. I would simply like to urge the council to rescind your vote to demolish the Reed and Hughes building and to rescind the $800,000 bond that you authorized. Simply for this reason: you will save money, you will convert a building that is now in bad condition to something that we can all be proud of. The best way to take care of a building like Reed and Hughes is not to demolish it. The best way is to restore it. We have that opportunity with the Women's Institute for Housing and Economic Development. They are proven. They have an excellent architect, engineers working on this. Please reconsider your votes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Maria Joliker, 161 Broadway, Norwich. I'd like to show my support for Dale Plummer, our historian, and for his efforts in the Reed and Hughes building. I would like to also say that I hope that you rescind on your decision to demolish the Reed and Hughes buildings, and that if the Women's Institute is able, for veterans, is able to build apartments there, they will be taxpayers, and that vacant property will become something useful. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else wishing to speak on non-agenda items? Hearing none, this hearing is closed. And I thank you all very much for your comments.
Public hearing, an ordinance amending Section 14-11.1 of the Norwich Code of Ordinances concerning the permit fees for the use of the Mohegan Park Group Picnic Area and Lakeside Pavilion.
I declare this public hearing on said proposed ordinance open. And for your information, a referral was sent to the Mohegan Park Improvement and Development Advisory Committee. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Those opposed? Anyone wishing to speak opposed? Anyone wishing to speak opposed? Anyone wishing to speak opposed? Public hearing is closed.
An ordinance amending Section 14-11.1 of the Norwich Code of Ordinances concerning the permit fee for the use of the Mohegan Park Group Picnic Area and Lakeside Pavilion.
Is there a motion and second to waive the reading of the full text and incorporate it into the minutes, said ordinance being given the second reading? Alderwoman Philbrick, Alderman Braddock. Those in favor? Is there a motion and second to bring this ordinance forward? Alderman Martin. Oh, you guys are so quick, I can't even get your names out. Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Yes.
I would like to ask if Mr. Townsend could come and explain this, and then I'll have a comment when he's done, please.
Good evening. So this ordinance is really to change the disparity between non-residents and residents. Non-residents currently pay $250, or they had been, to rent the pavilion. Residents are paying $175. There are a couple of reasons why that is problematic. One, at Public Works, we don't keep cash. We don't have a cash drawer. So people would come in, and we don't take credit cards. So people would come in, with either a check, which was fine, or with cash, which we then had to put in a sealed envelope and bring directly down to City Hall, but we wouldn't have change for them. So that was one of the issues. But more importantly, what we were seeing a lot of is, on average, we'd get about 90% residents and 10% non-residents. However, that isn't really true. What we were really seeing was non-residents who would go get their friend or their family member who lived in town to come in on their behalf and get the rental. So it didn't make any sense. It's not like we were making money off of it. In fact, the point of this was not to make money. The point of this is simply to cover the cost that Public Works incurs for people using these facilities. Over the last 3 or 4 years, and I've shared this with many of you already, I did the analysis of how much we were spending to provide this service, and between the overtime, because these are almost always happening on the weekends, but I mean all of them are basically on the weekends, so it's an overtime cost on top of everything else. But between the overtime and the personnel and the equipment and the materials and the truck, it comes out to about $20,000 a year for us to do this. We've collected roughly $20,000 to $21,000 a year for the last several years. So we're not making money. I want to make sure that's clear. And the other thing is that when we make it a flat rate of $200, we may encourage people from outside of town to come and use the facilities, which brings people into our city. Because now they're not trying to get around the system and get somebody that they know, but we're utilizing this for everybody, and we want Mohegan Park to be a destination. That's one of the reasons why we decided to do that. And also, it makes it an even $200. There's no change. We don't have to worry about giving change or making change. And the amount that we would generate using the same numbers that we've looked at for the last several years would still be right around $21,500. So we're not, again, this change doesn't
bring in more revenue. It's not a revenue source for us. It's just covering our expenses, keeping the program alive. People use it all the time. We book pretty much every weekend, which is a good thing. And, that's really the gist of it. Now, one thing I will point out, in the ordinance as it stands right now, it actually says a much lower fee is, I think it's $100 and $50. That is actually incorrect. That ordinance has not been changed for a number of years, for whatever reason. It was before I took over this position. I don't know why. I can't answer to that. What I can tell you is that it isn't correct, and it needs to be corrected regardless. So we're kind of doing it all at one fell swoop here. Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I tried to find some comps for rental or similar venues in the city, and so I thought, oh, the Warregan Ballroom, what a nice place to have a party. $750 is the going rate at the Warregan, so $200 for the pavilion is a bargain. I just thought that was interesting.
Anyone else? Further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, we will take a roll call, and this is a majority vote. Alderman Nash.
My quick question was, do we have to change anything on this? Because he was talking about, is that the 200 we're changing? Okay. Yes.
Alderman Martin?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Braddock?
Yes.
Alderwoman Philbrick?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Nystrom?
Yes.
Mayor Henchy, yes, that's unanimous. Thank you all.
Referral from Mohegan Park Improvement and Development Advisory Committee regarding the permit fees for the use of Mohegan Park Picnic Group Area and Lakeside Pavilion.
Quite a title. We did send the referral out. We have not gotten word back.
Referral from the Commission on the City Plan regarding a resolution to lease space to Cello Partnerships, DBA Verizon Wireless at 8 Mahan Drive, Fontaine Fields. Would you like me to read it?
Please.
January 3rd, 2017, the Honorable Mayor and Alderpersons of the Council of the City of Norwich. Referral from the City Council, request to lease space to Cello Partnerships, DBA Verizon Wireless on an existing light pole at 8 Mahan Drive, Fontaine Fields, to install, operate, and maintain antennas, remote radio heads, and other aperture equipment, and to include a non-exclusive right to egress and ingress from the public right-of-way for the purposes of installation, operation, and maintenance of a communication facilities. The Commission on the City Plan at its December 20th, 2016 meeting reviewed the above reference referral. Seated were Art Sharon, Frank Manfredi, Michael Lahan, Les King, Kathy Wazika, Swanjay San Behat, and Jason Arndt. After careful consideration, the Commission voted unanimously to forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council pursuant to Chapter 15, Section 4 of the City Charter, with the stipulation that access to the pole for installation, operation, and maintenance of the equipment be coordinated and limited to times when the field was not in use. Reason, it is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development to provide for adequate infrastructure to meet the community's needs. Art Chairman, Chairman.
A motion and second to accept this report. Alderman Martin, Alderwoman Gould, those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Audit presentation from Blum Shapiro, PC.
Sir? Yes, yes, please. And if you would speak into the microphone so that people at home can hear as well.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Ron Nosik. I was the engagement partner for the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2016 here in the city of Norwich. I believe the Director of Finance has passed out just a two-page summary to you guys. I'll be very brief, kind of speaking, if you will, at about a 30,000-foot level as to the salient issues or points reflective in the financial statement document, which, if you've taken a look at, is somewhere upwards of about 100, 115 pages. I do have a copy of it with me if you have any detailed questions related to the financial statements themselves. And after this evening, when I'm done, if there are any questions that do arise amongst any of the council members, if you can just filter them through the Finance Department, we'd be more than happy to address them and return to a subsequent meeting if need be. So, per the summary I've got, so what I want to talk to you about is the scope of the engagement itself and the results of our work embedded in the reports that we issue, some financial highlights related to the financial statements, and then briefly discuss what some final communications are that you actually have already received as a body. So the audit is performed actually under three levels, or three levels of reporting, if you will: generally accepted auditing standards, generally accepted governmental auditing standards, and then federal and state single audit requirements. So they do differ in what is required out of us as auditors in order to report on those. The generally accepted auditing standards is the primary audit opinion that we issue, and in that 115-page document that you get, that actually are the only 3 pages that belong to us, the auditors. The rest of that document is the representations of management. We are simply opining on those representations that are embodied in the financial statements and the notes to the financial statements. So we have issued an unmodified or clean audit opinion on those financial statements and notes to the financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30, 16, which basically says we opine that they do fairly represent the results of operations and financial position of the city as of that date, June 30. Under governmental auditing standards, we're required to obtain an understanding of the internal control systems here, mostly relative to financial reporting, as well as major compliance requirements that the city has, be they through state ordinance or state statute, or through bond ordinances and covenants and things of that nature. And we are required to report to you if there were any internal control findings or compliance findings relative to that work. If there were any control findings, they would be presented in the federal and state single audit reports as financial statement findings, either under the terminology of material weakness, which would be the highest level of concern, or significant deficiency. The reports under governmental auditing standards reported no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that were noted during the course of our audit. And as far as compliance, there were no instances of non-compliance relative to the audit that we've tested. Under uniform guidance, which was formerly known as federal single audit and state single audit, we are now required to report to you any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies relative to the controls over the federal or state major programs. So this isn't entity-wide or financial statement-wide. It's pinpointed just to those federal and state programs. Again, we've got to report to you if there are any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, and we need to report to you if there were any compliance findings relative to those grants. Again, there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies found. There were no compliance findings that were found. So in all cases of the 3 levels of which we are reporting on, they were all, in essence, unmodified or clean reporting, if you will. Some financial highlights to the financial statements, and I'll stick solely to the general fund, which I'm assuming is probably of the most relevance to you from a budgetary perspective, and speak to the financial position, if you will, or fund balance as of June 30, 2016. As of that date, it was $14,879,000 in fund balance. Of that fund balance, $14,652,000 was unassigned, or basically fund balance available for future appropriation. That represented about 12.36% of your annual general fund expenditures. Common practice in today's day and age has a target between 8 and 15%, so you're in right within that target range and in a very, very good position in my personal and professional opinion. Budgeted revenues, so we look at, let me back up real quick too. If you look in this, I've referenced page numbers that relate to the financial statements themselves as to where I extracted this information. Again, I know it's a rather onerous document that is issued. So if you have any questions, maybe you can get back to that page and it can be answered, or again, you can flow it through to us. But on page 75 starts on 75, 74, 75 is what we call RSI 1 and RSI 2, which is the budgetary statements on the general fund. So your originally adopted budget, if there's a column for modified and then a column for actual. So in both cases, both revenue and expenditures, you had favorable budgetary variances on both of those sides. So you outperformed what you had anticipated taking in revenue. Most of that was through tax collections. And you also did better expenditure-wise, or held down your expenditures, controlled them, your departments controlled them to stay within lines of the appropriation and to a small degree under what the overall appropriation was. So in the end, you have a budgetary surplus for the fiscal year. The only other thing, which I'm starting on page 2 here of this, that I think is worthy of highlight, if you will, are the position of the pension trust funds. You know as well as I do what's going on at the state of Connecticut and the influence the pension liabilities at the state of Connecticut are having on all of the local communities insofar as state funding flowing through. So you too have some pension trust funds here, as I'm sure you're quite well aware of. There's a city plan and the firefighters plan. The net position, or again, fund balance, if you will, of those plans combined at the end of the fiscal year was $154,111,000. That net position decreased by $7.3 million during the year, mostly due to market performance of your investments and then also obviously to ongoing paid benefits for retirees. And finally, as of June 30, 2016, the city plan and the firefighters plan respectively were almost 57.5% funded and 37.4% funded. Then the overall pension liabilities, again, city plan, a little over $112 million, and the firefighters plan was $3.7 million. So those are the actuarial liabilities as of June 30, 16. Not in this document here, but you also have an OPEB plan here in the city. There's a trust fund that manages that plan. There is going to be a change in how the accounting is performed and the financial reporting surrounding that OPEB plan starting next year. So you're going to start showing liabilities to the magnitude of these pension liabilities now on the balance sheet of the statement of net assets of the city, and that's in accordance with GASB statements. Our final communications to you, which you have received, they were issued with the audit report, simply detail any significant matters from the audit, any significant findings, which, as I've said earlier, there were none, any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, which there were no uncorrected misstatements. And sometimes in an audit, there might be an audit adjustment that is immaterial to the financial statements. Management doesn't care to post it. We are required to as auditors, to provide that to you, those charged with governance, so that you can evaluate the magnitude of that on your own. Again, any adjustments that did rise out of the audit procedures were posted by management. And then we also provide you with a summary of management's representations, which is a letter that we get, one of the last pieces of audit documentation we receive from management, indicating that essentially that they have told us everything that in their belief and to their best knowledge would be significant to those financial statements, and that no information was withheld from us. So that's my spiel. I thank you very much again for your time. If you have any questions for me right now, I'm more than happy to address them as best I can.
Yes.
Thank you. Under pension trust funds, on point number 3, next year we will show like a 43% liability. Is that correct? And this is on the firefighters plan.
No, on that third bullet, if you will, what I'm showing you is the funded status of those plans. So the actual pension liability, if we look at it globally, I told you there's that first bullet, there's $154 million in net assets. So those are the actual investments, less liabilities, if you will, in the plan. Add to that $112 million plus another $3.7 million. That's the actual total actuarial liability. So the percentages I'm giving you there are how much those net assets in bullet 1 actually compare percentage-wise to the total liability that exists under those pension plans.
This year, but next year when we change the accounting system, will it be reflected in the, can you show how that may be reflected here?
Nothing is changing in pensions. What's changing is for your OPEB plan. That'll be a separate disclosure altogether.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be spiked out in next year's financial statement. You'll see the difference, yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you for being here. In your document on page 2, I'll go to the third bullet point under pension trust funds. The city plan is funded at 57.46%, and the firefighters plan is funded at 37.4%. Are those recommended? Did you make any recommendations, or do you ever make recommendations about those percentages of funding for those pensions?
No, so your actuarially determined contributions or suggested contributions come from your pension actuaries. And then it's at the city's discretion, at the council's discretion, through the budgetary process as to how you fund those. If you fund up to or beyond or a little bit less than or significantly less than what the actuaries are telling you you should be contributing to the plan in order to fully fund it over a period of time. Okay. So there's to put it in some perspective, it's very rare in the state of Connecticut, and I would guess probably nationally. I primarily practice here in Connecticut and Rhode Island. Very rare to see a pension that's funded 100%. It's quite rare to see them anywhere over 85%. So where these are is not odd by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, thank you.
Bristol's.
Thank you. I can barely balance my checkbook, so my questions are going to, my question. On the first page, when you talked about a budgetary surplus, and that's the $306,000?
No. I actually, in the bullets here that I've got, I don't identify what the actual surplus was, but if you took the $3.3 million, which would be the favorable variance in revenues, and add to that the $306,000, so you'd be about $3.6 million in budgetary surplus.
But that's a good thing.
Yes, you outperformed your estimates. That's correct.
So just so that everybody knows, we had a budgetary surplus, but that does not necessarily mean that we have to spend that. All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Presentation from Bill Champagne and Reagan Minor about the 2016 tourism activities in Norwich.
Good evening. I'm Bill Champagne, President of the Board of Directors of the Norwich Historical Society. The Historical Society has had a very successful year. Our mission is to preserve, protect, and promote Norwich's rich history. We have worked to develop Norwich's historic assets so that residents, as well as visitors, appreciate our heritage. Norwich has incredible heritage. It just needs to be developed to become an important part of the city's economic development efforts and to be a more important part of our quality of life. We've got a very good board, but we are very fortunate to have as our consultant Reagan Minor, who, because of her good heritage work in Norwich, was named the Connecticut Tourism Commission 2016 Rising Star. And Regan will give you some highlights of what the Historical Society accomplished in 2016.
We had a very busy year this past year. Some of our most notable accomplishments are the creation of the Walk Norwich Trail System. Phase 1 included the Uncas Leap Trail and the Benedict Arnold Trail. Walk Norwich utilizes a mobile-friendly website which hosts the walks, a self-guided brochure, and interpretive and wayfinding signage. The walks officially launched on May 25th, 2016. In addition, NHS engaged the services of 5 student interns from the Norwich Free Academy this summer at the Visitor Center to research a topic in Norwich's history and write an article to be published in future Norwich Historical Society newsletters. Students worked on their articles while staffing the Visitor Center and engaged with the public. In addition, Norwich Historical Society collaborated with many heritage groups to host the Samuel Huntington wreath-laying ceremony, the Samuel Huntington pub crawl, and History Day on the Norwich Town Green during the summer of 2016. Over 1,000 visitors enjoyed the Norwich Heritage and Regional Visitor Center this season, coming from as close as Sprague, Connecticut, to as far as Japan. We opened for special events this summer, including the Greater Norwich Area Chamber of Commerce's Rockin' the Greens concert series and the Norwich Community Cinema's summer film series. However, our biggest event and biggest draw is Walktober. Walktober is a part of the Last Green Valley. It's one of their main events. The Last Green Valley is a national heritage corridor comprising of 35 towns in eastern Connecticut and southeastern Massachusetts. Norwich is the southernmost town in the Last Green Valley. The Last Green Valley hosts Walktober, which is a month-long event in which regional volunteers give guided walking tours to visitors. Over the past 3 years, Norwich has strategically coordinated their walks so visitors can spend their day in Norwich. As a result of the Historical Society's coordination, Norwich offered over 35 walks and events, a part of Walktober 2016, and attracted people from across the region. Norwich is now known for its great Walktober offerings, and we serve as a model for the region to follow. Our annual ghost tour is extremely popular. In 2014, we had 101 participants. In 2015, we had 140 participants, and this past year, in 2016, we had 180 participants. And this event could not have been pulled off without an army of small army of volunteers from NFA, the Norwich Historical Society Board of Directors, the Visitor Center volunteers, Norwich Police Department, and a special thank you to Public Works for helping us in the weeks getting ready for the event. They mowed the Norwich Town Green, they got the cemetery looking very beautiful, so thank you to Public Works for that. We really appreciate it. And lastly, we continue our partnership with representatives from the Norwich Heritage Groups, specifically members from the Leffingwell House Museum, the Slater Memorial Museum, Otis Library, the Mohegan Tribe, NCDC, and many others.
And thank heavens for Regan. She rattled all that off. She was involved with all of it. For our work going forward into 2017, we will be partnering with other organizations to protect some of Norwich's historic assets. One of the most important sites from a heritage development standpoint is Uncas Leap. This has the potential to be a heritage site appreciated on a national basis. There is substantial funding in place now thanks to Representative Emmett Riley, and we look forward to working with the Mohegan Tribe and the city to fully develop this site. We are also helping with 2 other significant buildings. The Buckingham Memorial. Senator Kathy Austin is heading a group working to stabilize this Connecticut Civil War governor's house, and Samuel Huntington's house. We are working with UCFS to find funds to do some historically appropriate work on the home of this nationally significant Revolutionary War era figure. We are also finalizing an exciting partnership with Norwich Public Utilities that will help us preserve another of Norwich's great historic buildings. This project, which we expect to announce in the coming weeks, will bolster our ongoing efforts to keep the rich history of Norwich alive for generations to come. And we both thank you very much for the opportunity to give you this update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions of them? No, I guess not. You got a lot of people in town that like ghosts, huh?
A 2016 year-end summary report from Michael Menders regarding the Commission for Persons with Disabilities.
Motion second to accept this report, please. Alderwoman Gould, Alderman Braddock. Those in favor? Thank you.
Letter stating Norwich Fire Department and emergency medical technicians are cleared for the implementation of the 2016 Connecticut State EMS protocol.
And I'll take a minute to read this. It is, says, As of this date, January 3rd, 2017, Norwich Fire Department emergency medical technicians are cleared for the implementation of the 2016 Connecticut State EMS protocol. From this point forward, all EMS care shall be conducted under this protocol. Congratulations to all on this accomplishment. You are the first in the region to attain this status. So may I have a first and a second to accept this, please? Alderman Nash, Alderman Martin, those in favor. And congratulations. Good job.
Communication from Seniors Affair Commission.
Motion and a second, please. Alderwoman Gould, Alderman Braddock. This is, where's my little paper? A long time, nope, there's a little binder there. Technical difficulty. Is that it? A long-time person who has worked very hard for the city will be leaving this commission. Olive Buddington has given a lot of time to so many things, and we thank her very much for all that she has done. And I thought I would just give you a little bit of the history of what she has done. She became a member of the City Council from December 1989 to December of 1991. As an alderwoman, she voted to prepare plans for a new senior citizen center. And she became a member of the Senior Affairs Commission on February 2nd, 1995, until the present. It's not bad. I wanted to just read you the Journal of the Council of the City of Norwich, December 5th, 1989. The organization meeting of the Council of the City of Norwich was held December 5th, 1989, at 7:30 in the council chambers. The meeting was called to order by City Clerk Muldoon, who administered the oath of office to Council President Charles A. Witt and the following members of the council for terms of December 5th, 1989 to December 3rd, 1991. And many of these names you'll know. Mrs. Linda D. Becker, Miss Olive J. Buddington, Mrs. Nancy A. DePietro, Mr. Louis J. Heller, Jr., Mr. Harry A. Jackson, Mr. Robert L. LaChapelle, Mr. Raymond L. Ouellette, Mrs. Beverly S. Raymond, Mr. Alan Ramondi, and Mr. James N. Sullivan. And on April 16, 1990, Alderwoman Buddington and Alderman Jackson, Sullivan, and Witt to prepare plans for a new senior center to be built with anticipated $2 million in state funds. And then February 6, 1995, resolved that the following be, and they hereby are appointed alternate members of the Senior Affairs Commission for terms to expire. Olive Buddington to fill vacancy John McCaddy, to fill unexpired term of Raymond Dussault. So I think you can see that Olive had played a big part in, and Leanne probably knows, a big part in the Senior Citizen Center up by Kelly, right across from Kelly. And for any of you who have not been there, you really ought to visit. It is really quite remarkable. And so for all her years of service, we thank Olive very, very much. Motion to accept, I think we had a motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
City Manager's Report.
Thank you. This is the City Manager's Report for January 17th, 2017. The Mayor and I continue our weekly meetings. We have met twice with a concerned citizen to address an issue he had and to keep him updated with the status of his inquiry. On Friday, January 6th, several city staff members, members of the Norwich Heritage Trust, and I met with Todd Levine from SHPO, Betsy Crum, Executive Director of the Women's Institute, Bill Morse, who has proposed funding a partial renovation, and others were also in attendance. The group will meet again at the end of January, providing additional documentation is received from Mrs. Crum regarding funding and stabilization of the building. We are, as an aside, it's not in this, we are expecting that material this week. That was the goal that was set at the meeting. Later in the day, Josh Parthier and I met with representatives from William Blair, that's our investment bank and financial asset management company, regarding refunding bonds, which is resolution number 2 on this evening's agenda. So we decided that we would go forward with it, obviously. Bridget Marks, Human Resource Director, attended the January meeting for Commission for Persons with Disabilities to discuss their request for the city to have a communication handout for new and existing employees regarding effective communications for persons with disabilities. Bridget also attended the Diversity and Employment Committee, which discussed replacing the chair, Diane Daniels, who resigned to assume her new duties as president of the NAACP. Congratulations to Diane on her new appointment. There was also discussion on adding members to the committee. Finally, my assistant, Jackie Barbarossa, has started coordinating online ethics training for all council members, city department heads, volunteer fire chiefs, and heads of various agencies, including Norwich Community Development, Norwich Housing Authority, Norwich Public Schools, Norwich Public Utilities, Otis Library, and Uncas Health. Positive feedback has been received, and those contacted have until January 31st to complete the training. I will keep you informed of our progress and the next steps. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
At the last meeting, Mr. Salamone, Alderman Nash asked you for some specific information regarding updates prior to the budget season, and I don't see that addressed here. I believe you said you would bring it at the next meeting.
No, I said it would be in February. I believe I
okay.
had said. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Is anyone else? Yes.
Thank you. A tentative date for that meeting with SHPO and Betsy Crum. Do you have a tentative date at this point?
Yeah, I believe it's next Friday, a week from this Friday. So let's see what the number is. That would be January 27th.
In the morning?
I believe so. I can get the exact time, but I believe it's at 10 a.m.
Thank you. I'm interested in attending.
I'll confirm that with you.
Second question I have, the bid process on demolition, where does that stand?
We have the specifications complete on the demolition process. We are presently out to bid or soon to be out to bid with an expectation of 3 weeks for response and then analysis of those bids. So it's about a month away before we award the bid for the demolition.
Barring a reluctance on state officials to support demolition, how does that proceed?
I'm not
if
sure.
It's not approved by them. There was a request for the city's approval to have the demolition go forward. That was denied at the first level. Since then, we've had all this discussion with the parties ongoing, and I appreciate and thank all the people participating in all of that. But without that initial approval, how do you proceed?
Well, there has been no formal stopping of the demolition at this point.
True.
That would take an injunction, a legal injunction at this point, initiated by the state's attorney's office. They have not done that at this point. They are gathering information. They gathered it somewhat at the SHPO hearing, but then since then, we've had subsequent meetings to give them more information and for both parties to meet and see, in their words, if there's a remedy to this short of
Other than-
demolition.
Okay. Thank you for the information.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Salamone, how many people have completed their ethics training at this point in time? I mean, rough percentage?
I don't know that number exactly. I can get it to you. I know you have.
Anyone else? Yes?
Thank you. Will there be an official RFP request for Betsy Crum to go forward with this process on the Reed and Hughes building?
Please make sure you speak into your microphone.
Thank you. Will there be an official request from an RFP request to designate if we're going to be looking at Betsy Crum or some other developer?
I think what will happen, we'll be getting more information this week, hopefully getting more information this week. At that point, there needs to be a decision point if we want to consider their counter proposal to what we have already, which is a demolition resolution. So we're not at that point. I would not go to RFP until we brought it back to council for consideration if that was warranted. We don't know if it's warranted yet because we don't have specific information from the Women's Institute or the individual that has come forward to donate funds. So the city needs to take a look at that, see if it's viable, and then possibly take it the next step. We'll see at the meeting of the 27th what the state's attorney has to say about the whole process. It's possible that the state's attorney's office could agree with the city's determination of demolition or make a suggestion that we come up with a negotiated solution. It's too early to tell on that.
One more question.
Please.
When we looked at the Reed and Hughes building, we talked about $300,000 to shore up the building. And there's a Mr. Morse who is thinking about coming up with a $200,000 sum of money. Yet when SHPO came down, they thought that it would be more like a $500,000 to shore up the building. And where would we get, that was quoted from Todd at the meeting when we walked through the Reed and Hughes building. He didn't think that the numbers that we were looking at, the $300,000, were adequate. So where would the rest of this money come from?
That's a good question. That would either be a city endeavor or another benefactor. It wouldn't be a grant at this point. It certainly wouldn't be time for a grant at this point.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes.
Just more of a comment. Thank you, Mayor. One, it's an investment offering from Mr. Morse. It is not a donation. I think that needs to be clear for the record.
Did I say donation?
Yes.
I apologize.
And the other thing is, I attended the meeting with Todd Levine and others, and Betsy Crum and the architect. At that meeting, the figure discussed was $300,000. It was not $500,000. And the interesting thing about a private investment from Mr. Morse, and it requires some legalese as well, is because the building then also has to be out of the city's name. But if that in fact took place, then Mr. Morse could indeed in fact apply for funding through the downtown bond programs. And this city has already seen investments through the downtown bond programs already be used in previous investments in the private sector here in downtown These guys received dollars for, quote, shoring up of the second floor, which allowed them to occupy the building as it now stands today. We all appreciate that very much. But those funds are, in fact, available for private investment in downtown Norwich. And in fact, that's what this proposal is, a private investment with the Women's Institute. Thank you.
Alderman Nystrom, when Chippo walked through the building.
I wasn't there, just for the record.
All right.
The walk.
That's when the $500,000, he said the $300,000 he did not feel at that point was enough to shore up the building. He then said, we asked the question, well, how much? He said $500,000. That's $500,000. Now, that was not at the meeting, but that was said at the building.
The meeting took place after the walkthrough.
Okay, gentlemen,
We could continue this.
we
Thank
could
you.
continue
We should.
this forever, and so let's move on.
Thank
Well,
you.
we're
Peter.
all still friendly.
Absolutely.
Relative to locating communication equipment at Fontaine Field.
A motion and a second, please. Alderman Martin, Alderman Nash. Is there discussion? Yes, sir?
How much will we receive for this opportunity, revenue?
Gentlemen?
I think I have the figure, but I want to confirm it with, is it 15,000? I'm sorry, 8,000. I don't know what.
Per annum.
15. 8,000 annually.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Citizen comment on resolutions.
These are comments on the resolutions on the agenda, and we have Beryl Fishbone. I will remind you, please state your name and address clearly into the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Beryl Fishbone, 19 Bliss Place. I just wanted to say that on a personal level, I had no problems with the change in the Mohegan Park fees. It makes sense. It's not a moneymaker, but it will make people's life a little bit easier going forward. But you may want to think about...
Are you speaking about the resolutions at hand?
Yes, I think.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not?
No.
I apologize.
That's all right. Thank you very much. I checked my list to make sure.
There's only 2.
There's only 2. And that didn't sound familiar, but thank you. Anyone else? We have 2 resolutions on the agenda relative to St. Patrick's Day Parade and relative to authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds. Yes, sir?
Good evening, David Crabb, 47 Prospect Street. I oppose Resolution 2. Homeowners lost homes using equity for investments as the addendum to this resolution referenced. How does the city intend to make the taxpayers whole if money is lost on this investment? I looked in the charter. Chapter Roman 8, titled Borrowing, begins with number 1, the borrowing power that IDs the purposes that the city can borrow. I didn't see anything in there on investments. Then 3 describes the terms and forms of bonds and notes. And I think they specified public works and things of that nature. And 4 specifies that an ordinance is necessary. So how can you use a resolution to rob voters of the money that they authorized to be borrowed for a specific public purpose? In fact, I wonder if the city manager was wrapping his arms around the various questions that council members have asked him over the last several weeks, and this is his solution to all of their questions. Just throw some more money at it. How can a bond voters approved be refinanced? Now, I can't think of the legal term that goes on the legal documents that authorize something outside of the limits of that document, but I'm sure that the city attorney can come up with that term. And I don't believe that's ever been put in any city bond, so I'm puzzled about this. And what's even worse in my view is during this budget season, when we talk about performance, there is no, let's say, Plan B or additional document to lay out how the past performance is of all the previous borrowings, refundings that the Democrats did. I think that the Republicans are getting drafted to continue the last pro tem's plan about don't change anything.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the resolutions at hand? Anyone else wishing to speak on the resolutions at hand? Anyone else wishing to speak on the resolutions at hand? Hearing none, the citizen comment is closed, and I thank you all very much.
Relative to holding the St. Patrick's Day Parade on March 5th, 2017.
A motion and a second, please. Alderman Braddock, Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Relative to a resolution authorizing the issuance and sales of up to $3,500,000 for the cost associated with City of Norwich general obligation refunding bonds.
Motion and a second, please. Alderwoman Gould, Alderman Braddock. Is there discussion? Yes?
I'm confused. Where's Josh? Oh. So I understand the terminology. Refunding bonds is very similar to an individual refinancing his or her mortgage. This refunding would be an advanced refunding, which means that the money from the new bonds would be placed in an escrow account and invested. So we're going to refinance and get a better rate. And I'm talking very, very general here because, as I said before, I can barely balance my checkbook. So we're going to refinance the bonds.
Right.
We're going to utilize a savings.
We're going to, we won't do this unless we can save money.
Okay.
As of this, interest rates fluctuate quite a bit. The council authorized a refunding, I think it was in November 2015, and gave the authorization to do that refunding anytime from that point through the end of 2016.
Okay.
It did, when we issued bonds last February 2016, that refunding didn't make sense. But in the fall, it did make sense. We were able to save $180,000. So now we're at the same situation. With this refunding, it would effectively refund the rest of that issue from 2009, a 2009 Series A bond. And unfortunately, the way interest rates are going right now, we're not going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. It might be $30,000 to $50,000, but I think that our opportunity to save money through refunding is fleeting. I think interest rates are going to probably be on the upswing. So this resolution would give us the authorization to do it if at the time that we sell bonds this March, it makes sense. It's most cost effective to bundle this refunding in with our normal round of borrowing, which we will be doing for road improvements, gas line extensions, because there are certain fixed costs whenever you bond. You have to go to the rating agency. So for us, that's Standard & Poor's. you have to pay the financial advisor for, a certain set of fees. So if you can do that while you're doing this refunding, it spreads those fixed costs out, and you save more money.
Okay, and then my last question is in your correspondence. It says, "We intend to do a bond issue in March of 2017. Can you
Yep.
tell me what that bond issue is going to be?
The road improvements, gas line extensions. So these were previously authorized projects. We're bonding them as we spend the money. So that's,
Thank you.
yep, welcome. Any other
Alderwoman
questions?
Gould?
Okay, Josh. I'm on the explanation that we got.
Right.
Second paragraph. This refunding would be an advance refunding, which means that the money from the new bonds would be placed into an escrow account and invested.
Yes.
Are we buying Pepsi? We're buying
No.
Coca-Cola, Walmart?
No, we're buying stuff, something that's called slugs. It's state and local government securities that are, highly rated securities. So this 2009 bond issue, the bonds are callable in 2018. So we're issuing the refunding bonds now. The proceeds from those bonds are going into an escrow account because we can't call the bonds until 2018. But if we wait until 2018 and the interest rates rise, then we've lost the opportunity to save money by refunding them. So what we do is issue the bonds, and that bond issue will be somewhere between $2.9 million and $3.5 million, and the proceeds will go into the escrow account, and they'll earn a very, very, very minuscule amount of rate of return, but it will be adequate to call the bonds, which is to say pay off the old bonds in 2018 when the call date comes due.
Okay, so this isn't like gambling with the stock market or
No.
anything with our money?
No
Okay.
risk.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? No? Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? And that would be unanimous, thank you. I will entertain a motion. Oh, boy. Alderman Martin, Alderman Nash. I take it that's a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn, yes, ma'am.
Those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Thank you all very much.
Can the Mohegans get overextended at some point?
Well, it's a fair question, and it's the question we always have to ask ourselves at every turn. And as I said earlier, we are pursuing multiple opportunities on parallel fronts, and just in hearing me say that sounds like if we're not careful, we could get out over our skis. This one is a little bit different in that not only is it capital light, but it is right here at home, and it reinforces our position in this flagship property, which, as you've heard us say in a number of different ways here at the podium today, we are the Mohegan Tribe of Connecticut, and we will always be the Mohegan Tribe of Connecticut. Other ventures in other places may come and go from a commercial standpoint, but this is right here close to home, and I don't see this one failing.
Since this is a private land purchase, I guess is what it is, does that change the relationship at all between the tribe and local government, or is it, how would you characterize what
I think
what
we'll
happens
just
next?
be that much closer. We'll be that much closer. That's right.
And there you have it, I guess.
Kevin, you talk about attracting third-party developers. Do you have any lined up now, or what can you say about the status of that?
What I can say about that is that is the next 12 to 18 months of conversations that we're going to have, keeping in mind, and someone please correct me, fact check me on this if I'm wrong, but first shovel in the dirt isn't probably either estimated nor required any sooner than 2020. Yeah. So we've got time. And part of that time in attracting potential developers and investors has to do with the fact that we now have a one-year timeline for the property to be finally cleaned up. So between this date and a date somewhere in February of next year, the site will be cleaned. We'll actually take title next year. In the interim, to answer your question, we'll be aggressively pursuing folks, some of which we are already in conversations with now.
Governor, can you talk more about how the development of this site, the proposed development, fits in with tourism and the state's approach to tourism and making this part of the state a destination even more so than it is?
Well, listen, this portion of the state has natural attributes that aren't necessarily equally distributed in all